Walk us through, who is your greatest player of all time?
Barring myself. So the greatest player not in this room. He's corpsing. Turn the camera. Get in front of the camera. Let's get this. Blooper reel.
Okay.
He's not even taking me seriously. But, okay, so actual greatest player of all time, barring myself. Got it. So obviously it's down to, well, let me just lead with what I consider my top 5. All right, we'll get this out of the way right now. So we'll take this, and I think that you could theoretically make a case for all of these players, but I do think it comes down to 2. So my number 5 would be Ross Cawthon. My number 4 would be Azul. My number 3 would be Pramawat. My number 2 would be Tord Reklev, and number 1 would be Jason Kleczynski. Obviously, the big debate, especially after Tord just won an unprecedented 5th IC, after he won an unprecedented 4th IC, after he won an unprecedented 3rd IC, is really how does this start to stack up against Jason's 3 Worlds wins? So I've played a little bit with Tord online, and I've played over the years very frequently with Jason. And so obviously there might be some degree of bias, I'll be honest, but a lot of players who are making their opinions known have not really played with both players, or they haven't played modern Pokemon and older Pokemon. So you can almost make it a parallel to the Michael Jordan and LeBron James debate, where no one's going to touch Jordan's wins. And you have Jason with 3 World Championship wins. And they came years apart. It wasn't just a hot run. So for me, when I look at the greatest players, a lot of it, and you can look from my list even, from my top 5, longevity and not just having your hot couple of years carries a lot of weight for me. Like you have Pramawat, you have Ross, who have been excellent players for over a decades at this point. And that carries so much weight to me. And then you have Azul, who's just his results speak for himself at this point. He could easily shoot up as he gets even more years playing. But it's just I'm giving points to, if you can do well in different styles of formats, as the game has changed over the years. And not only does Jason have his 3 Worlds wins, but I want to point out a couple of his other big accomplishments. He won Nationals in 2015. That is definitely would be what I would consider modern era Pokemon, with a large event. So that's a huge. It's not the same weight as a Worlds win, but it's right up there with an IC. Absolutely. In 2003, he won the Fan Appreciation Tournament. That was the biggest event of that year for Masters. So that's another highest level event win. Then he won the Tropical Mega Battle, which was the highest event of that year. And I think, was it 99, 2000? I don't remember. I think it's 99. And then you have Super Trainer Showdowns, which are the biggest tournaments. So you have to look beyond just those 3 Worlds wins to what was he doing at the highest level for the 4 years prior to that. And the game was entirely different. So you have all sorts of styles of Pokemon that he was proving he was at the absolute best level of the game at. This is also a player that I've watched play, and he is as good as any other player tactically that you're going to have. So their scoreboard, he still wipes the floor with any other player, even with Tord's 5 IC wins. Now, I'm going to make some cases in the other direction as well here. That I think Jason is the best tactical player I've ever seen. He's gone on to play poker a lot. He's got an incredible tactical mind. It is translated very well to that as well. He is solid at chess. He's just very, very gifted on that front. I think that if you look at a lot of his wins, he's a very particular style of deck that he likes to play. It has to be disruptive, yet put a lot of pressure on. He had Seismitoad at his Nationals win, Mewtrick in his first Worlds win. You had Gardevoir with Psychic Lock in his second win. You had, I believe, Seismitoad with Garbodor, if I remember correctly. Was it Seismitoad Garbodor in his third win? Or maybe it was Darkrai Garbodor? It was pressure, disruption, choke out the opponent during the span of the game. When he won the Fan Appreciation Tournament, it was Sizor Ferret Muck, which was also somewhat like that style of deck. I don't remember the Tropical Mega Battle. It was probably some Haymaker thing. But that being said, it's like when Jason's style of deck is good, he is the best player at it, and he will win a disgusting percentage of the time. But when the style of decks that Jason likes are not good, he is stubborn. He's not an open-minded player, and he's not particularly, like, he's going to play the other decks well, but he doesn't choose to play them. If someone was in control of his deck choices for the seasons where he didn't do as well, I think he would have played those decks very, 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 very well at an elite level as well. But he is definitely prone to playing Jason decks. Whereas I think if you look at Tord is a much more versatile player, and I think he is overall a better reader of metagames. I think that he is a better deck builder. I think one of Jason's problems is he is also a slower player. And I know Tord got in trouble for slow playing, but I think a lot of that has to do with the time limit now, where he is certainly not the only player guilty of that. And it's an ugly situation where, like, I'm not excusing slow playing, but I also would like to see a major overhaul of the time control because it is not good. But Tord has also the ability to play incredibly fast and incredibly well. I will say that Tord and Jason are the two players that I have watched play that have actively impressed me in terms of some of the plays that they make, where I think even the other players, like on my top 5, my top 10, my top 20, it's like, these are all excellent players, and a lot of them are better than I have ever been. Like, do not get me wrong. Like, I don't know where to actually put myself beyond jokes, but it's one of those where, like, I'm keeping up with most of the players, like, generally same style of play. I'm playing very similarly. But those are the two guys that I sit down and I watch. I'm like, they are playing at a noticeably higher level than I ever did, even in my prime. And that's impressive. So I've seen some players play individual games when, like, I'm really impressed by what you did there. But these are players that just multiple times I'm impressed by. And I don't say that lightly. I think that when you try to look at the whole scoreboard argument again, where wins versus modern performance, tie back to the Michael Jordan LeBron thing. And I'm a LeBron guy on that argument. Like, it's hey, we did Space Jam here. Who am I sending up to play the aliens? I'm picking LeBron. And I'm taking the opposite stance here a little bit with the Tord and Jason debate, but, like, it really is just, it's close. You have two elite, like, the two best of games I've ever seen. And the big tiebreaker for me, it really is the different eras that Jason was able to be successful in. Whereas Tord's success is still very much the modern era. It's a certain style of Pokemon. Like, he's playing a lot of our old retro formats with us online on a site that I'm not going to reference because I don't want to get taken down. But we're like, he's playing all the old formats. I know he's a huge fan of, like, the 06 era, like the old EX era stuff. Like, he's got great taste. Like, again, that's what I've gotten to play him in. I'm going to do a quick, I am 2-0. I am 2-0 against Tord. Jason, on the other hand, my track record's a lot worse against. But obviously that's a small sample size and means nothing. But I got to hype myself up here, the best player of all time. But no, it's one of those ones where, like, he's obviously very excellent in those formats as well. It's the same thing with, like, I do think the older formats were harder. I think the newer competition is harder. I think there was more ability for good players to leverage their skill in the older formats. And it's not a knock on modern players, because modern players absolutely would be able to be, like, the good modern players would be very good then too. Like, the formats don't have the formats feel a lot more high variance now. Like, the games are shorter. Like, there's less time to use your skill to leverage yourself out of poorer luck. Games snowball more. So it's like, it's just a different style of Pokemon. So that it really is why I put a lot of weight behind navigating. Like, if you play modern Pokemon and then go back and play, like, old Wizards of the Coast era stuff, like base set or up through, like, Neo or whatever, it's like, it's not the same game. It's a completely different game. So, I mean, I don't ever suggest anybody play base set or, like, Neo formats. They're terrible. But we all had to deal with them back in the day. But no, like, don't do it unless you don't like yourself very much.
What would it take for you? What would it take for Tord to overtake Jason as the greatest player of all time?
I mean, Tord has a top 4 and a second place at Worlds already. And I would make a case that, if I remember correctly, untimed, he probably would have won Worlds this year.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think that.
I mean, that doesn't change anything. Like,
sure.
I'm not trying. Like,
No,
the time control is absolutely the facet of it. So like that doesn't change the result. But it's like he was in a very good position. If I remember correctly, I apologize if I'm off on that. But I mean, a Worlds win is step 1. I like to joke that, like, when you've won all 4 ICs, that counts as one world. You've conquered the world. I'm not the only one to make that joke, but like that definitely, like, I would say that his IC accomplishments and his Worlds accomplishments honestly are pretty close to 3 worlds to me, especially with all the regionals wins and everything. But then there are Jason's other accomplishments. And then there's just the gap in terms of time and different, like, style, and like and Tord's had a pretty long run now, don't get me wrong, in the grand scheme of things. But it's just, time is going to be an important thing. Like, it's just going to, like, once he, like you said, his first Worlds accomplishment or whatever was 2012, you believe?
Let me check that real quick just so I have it.
Yes. Yeah, nonetheless, but it's like, it was later than that when you really got Tord as we know it, where he's just been an absolute world beater. So it really is just like 5 more years. We'll see if the accomplishments keep coming. I see no reason for them not to. Like, it's one of those ones where, like, who do you want me sending at the aliens? And I wouldn't be upset with either. All right, I'll say either choice we win, but it's just one of those ones where, like, I'd like to see, because again, he's doing well in the EX era. It's just, it is really longevity at this point, because people talk about Jason as if he's just 3 Worlds wins, and he's definitely much, much more than that. And it's another thing where, from my understanding with Tord, he played, at least this was used to be the case, I don't know if it's still the case, but he played an unbelievable amount of games for his testing and everything. So you're dealing with 2 different styles of players. From my understanding, Tord brute forces a lot of the testing through, and he's going to wind up with the best decks because of this. Whereas if you look at a lot of what was going on back in the day, we didn't have the tools to be able to play that amount of games. There wasn't the information. You're not refining lists quite to the same level. So there is I say that Tord, I think, is the better deck builder. He winds up with the better lists overall. But so much of what Jason was doing was his raw intuition as well. So it's just a very different approach. So seeing Jason succeed where you don't know what people are going to show up with, and having to basically innovate your own decks from scratch when there wasn't the information available is total. And while also succeeding in 2015, where you do start to see the information similarly available to where it is now. Like, now we have, like, Limitless and all those lists, so it's even more so. And with before, like, PTC Geo Online and now Live, like, you just get so many lists. So the metagame evolves really, really quickly. So you're dealing with different skill sets where you have a solved metagame that you're now trying to make an answer for, versus you have a very open metagame. And I'm not saying one's easier than the other, but it's different. And I know Jason's excelled at both. I assume Tord would as well. Like, but that's still, there is that discrepancy there, just from time periods and when they played. Yeah, no, at the end of the day, I do believe that Jason Klaczynski is the greatest Pokemon player of all time. Is that going to stand? I mean, Tord is certainly breathing down his neck. Anyone who doesn't believe that it's close is selling one player or the other short.
Greatest player of all time and why? That is a tough one. So my personal opinion is Tord Reklev, just because of how hard it is to win multiple international championships and for how long he's competed at the top level ever since the 2016-17 season. I think it has to be him. My only thing I'll say is it's kind of like the LeBron MJ debate, where Jason Klaczynski never really had a shot at top of his game, winning international or even playing really in international championships. So while I do think Tord is the greatest player of all time, I really think it's hard to fully gauge unless Jason had opportunity like this to play this many major events.
For me, the greatest TCG player of all time is Jason Klaczynski. Now, I've had the privilege of be able to play against both Tord and Jason, and in terms of gameplay wise, it's like once you're at that level, there's not much room for variance in terms of like how people play. So it's really about like accolades at that point. And for me to be the best, in order to be considered the best, you have to at least win Worlds once. Like if Tord wins Worlds at some point, sure. But right now, like you can't be the best player of all time without winning the World Championship. That's just how it is for me.
Where do you rank yourself? Do you ever think about your own position in the greatest players of all time? Chris Fulop placed you in the top 5 players of all time. Do you ever think about where you stack up?
Sure. Yeah, I definitely like think about whenever the online community comes up with like who's the greatest of all time debate, who's your top 5, who's your Mount Rushmore, right? Like I'll check them out. When they're talking about like the greatest of all time, I expect it to be like with Tord and Jason, rightfully so. But like when they're talking about like the Mount Rushmore of like Pokemon, I'm like, man, if I'm not on there, I'm going to be a little salty. Because it's like one of those things where it's like, there's so much recency bias with these debates that like you can't really talk about. It's like you can't really talk to anyone about it with like any kind of like empirical evidence. It's all just like feeling. But like, so I don't really take these debates too seriously, but like they're fun. And like when people don't have me on their top 5, I'm like, all right, but you better have some great picks to not have me on there, right? You know what I mean? So if I see someone who's like, you're not in the top 5. What are you doing up here? You know what I mean? So it's like, but there's a lot of like, I could probably name, a lot of players who like I respect a lot and who, if they were on someone's top 5 and I wasn't on there, no problem. But like, if you're going to not put me on the top 5, you got to have like some good names on there. You know what I mean? So it's just like one of those things where it's like, if I'm not on your top 5, you have to have great names. Like, it doesn't have to be like, and if you want to like expand it to like, what they've done for the game, you could have players who are worse than me at Poke. That's fine. But they have to have like extreme accomplishments kind of thing, like outside or like contributing to the game, stuff like that.
So who is, to put you on the spot a little bit, who is your Pokemon TCG top 5 then? Okay,
so I think it's pretty undisputed. 1, 2 is Jason and Tord. And then at that point, you kind of get into this like gray area of like, a lot of like personal feelings get into play of those. For me, Azul's up there. It's funny because like Azul is like a big goofball kind of thing, but like he grinds Pokemon like no human I've ever seen, to the point where like if you ask someone who loves the Pokemon TCG the most, it's Azul. Like, which is funny because he like likes Pokemon, but not to the point where other people like Pokemon. He likes Pokemon less than other people like Pokemon, but he loves the TCG specifically more than anyone I've ever seen. And so that's, him, I would put him up there. I would put Puka up there. I think he is probably the best player to have not done well at Worlds. A lot of it is the era that he played in, where Worlds was specifically a very metagamey tournament, because like it was much smaller, like the players like knew everyone, like you knew exactly who everyone was playing, and then like you kind of had like metagame more, and his style was much more like Tord's, where it's like you just play consistent decks and that are just powerful. And so like he would do less well at Worlds because he would get metagamed out. And then whereas like nowadays you can, the field is so large that being consistent is much more important than being metagamey. So Kyle is definitely up there. He's one of the best to ever do it. And then as for if I'm not putting myself in number 5, because I think that's where I probably appropriately end up is like on the 5th, maybe on some people's I'm on their 4. But like 4 or 5 is generally where I would put myself. But if I'm not putting myself on there, then it has to be, for me, it has to be Ross. Ross is a great deck builder. He's been in the game forever. He innovates all the time. There's so many decks that he's like just put out that people just play. One of the more famous ones is a deck called The Truth from 2011. Where he got second at the World Championship. He's also gotten second at the World Championships twice, which is extremely unlucky for him that he got paired against those matchups because the players that he lost to, great players, but they were one and done. And so unfortunate for Ross that he's never been the world champion. I definitely think he would have been a player deserving of it. And like even like he kind of he made famous the Inteleon Rad Charizard deck. He made a Roaring Moon go on the map. Like no one was playing Roaring Moon until Ross played Roaring Moon, and then he top 8'd with it. And now at the end of that format, everyone played Roaring Moon. So yeah, Ross is just a phenomenal player. Can't say enough about him. Plus, he's like a funny guy.
Who do you think is the greatest Pokemon player of all time?
The greatest Pokemon player of all time have always been Jason Klasinski, in my opinion. He was the one I grew up watching. I was always admiring just how he played, how he figured out, new decks and everything. He was basically my role model, idol when I was growing up and trying to improve and get better at the game itself. I felt like every time I watched one of his games, he would do something, small, like a little detail, right? Where, for example, he had a supporter in hand, but he chose not to play it. And I remember, many years ago, I was like, wow, that's genius. You didn't play the N yet? That must be, a good reason for that, right? And it surely was that I figured out many years later. Like the timing of everything was so important. And he won 3 world championships as well. I'm trying to, get to a point where I can rival him, but it's very difficult. As many have pointed out, there's been 2 very different eras as well. So it's difficult to compare. You would have to sort of have some arbitrary metric for what is, more difficult or not, right? Like the old world championships that are smaller but have, more, elite players at them, compared to, a 2,000-3,000 people international championship that have, half of them playing their first event for the first time. So it really depends how you want to measure. But I feel like we both have done things that are going to be very difficult to replicate in the future for like any player. You would need a crazy amount of dedication at least.
I think everybody agrees with that. Where do you rank yourself as far as greatest Pokemon players of all time go?
I think I would have to rank myself in top 2, but I still don't know if we can rank ourselves ahead of Jason or not. I still think that's up for discussion for all future times. Maybe if he started playing again, right, and we could see how he did in the modern era, then maybe it would be easier to answer. But I play a lot with Jason actually just in my spare time because he's a really fun guy, and we become very good friends over the last few years. And he's a very good guy, and he is very unique. Like he views the game at the absolute highest level, and I haven't been able to find anyone that is as technically good as him again. Like I notice all the small things he does that I can't find in any other player.
Now, you've gotten to play with Jason in some contexts over the years. I think you went to one of his RSPK tournaments at a mall, and then you've played against him in some other RSPK events. How has it been to play against Jason, and how did those games you play against Jason go? I think you guys met in the finals, right, of an RSPK event, which is his kind of format, right?
Yeah, RSPK is, I think, my favorite format. So I really like to enjoy, playing with those old decks whenever possible, really. And I played a lot against Jason in these events as well. I think I have a pretty solid head up on him so far, actually. So that's been fun. But the games are always really, really close and could go either way. But the coin's been on my side so far at the very least. We actually played a top 4 match in I think the biggest online RSPK tournament that's ever been, just a couple of weeks ago. I did end up getting the better of him at that one. So that was really cool.
And is your Pokemon TCG legacy something you think about or causes you stress while you're preparing for events?
I'm always stressing about just my preparation process, I think, because I want it to be as good as possible. And I know I have a lot of people that look up to me, so I don't want to disappoint them too much. So I want to make sure that at least I'm bringing a reasonable deck, and after that, like, half the job is already done, I think. Then it's just about playing that deck to a somewhat reasonable degree after. But like 99% of the time is sunk in before the event, not in the event, right? So,
at what point did you realize that you were in contention for the title of the greatest Pokemon player of all time?
I think that contention question really didn't arise until I won the 3rd international in a row, which I think personally was a little bit too fast, because that was, of course, really impressive and all, right? I think so, at least. But I still feel like I wasn't quite there yet. It was just, the recency bias, hype of the moment kind of thing. But when I got, this placement at Worlds and got the, couple extra internationals when the events, like after COVID, when the events had taken off and became so much bigger, then I think it was like at least a little bit more reasonable to have me up there in contention for, the status. But it's still very difficult to say, of course.
Kyle Pukasukovic, best player ever. Like people are lucky he works for TPCI. Like, honestly, they're honestly lucky. His reign was always nationals, even though he didn't, I guess, have the best Worlds resume. If you have a better nationals resume than Worlds, I think you're a lot better. It's harder to do that than it is in Worlds, if you will. You have to win way more.
Who do you think is the greatest Pokemon TCG player of all time?
I think it's Tord Reklev. Like, in an age now with so much information, you can just Google Pokemon and you can access so many resources about Pokemon. And the fact that he's just consistently performing better than everybody else is insane. Jason's wins are incredibly impressive, and I think if he would continue to play now, I think it would be much more of a competition, but currently it's Tord Reklev.
Who do you think is the greatest Pokemon TCG player of all time?
Jason Klasinski, no doubt about it.
I am here with Mr. Luke Morsa. How you doing, Luke?
Hey man, I'm doing good. How are you today?
I'm big chillin', bro. I got an important question for you. Who do you think is the greatest Pokemon TCG player of all time?
Jason Klasinski.
Who is the greatest Pokemon TCG player of all time?
Tord Reklev.
And why is that?
Because I believe his IC accomplishments outclass Jason's.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sick. I'm going around and just getting everybody's takes.
Am I in danger now?
I'm doing a video.
Jason is also goated. So, and I really want him to come back as well.
Yes, I mean, that'd be sick. Apparently he loves Dialga now. That's his thing. Apparently he's just playing a ton of Dialga. Yeah.
That's amazing.
He's grinding out infinite Dialga games.
Oh, okay.
So watch out.
Yeah. Keep up.
I'm going with Tord. I think Jason K is undeniably the second best player, but Tord has actually done so much in the modern era
he's won 5 IC. He's almost won 6. He got second place at UIC last year. Like, he is, in my opinion, the best player. Like, Jason K has won 2 worlds, or 3 worlds, right?
3 worlds.
Which is very much unheard of and hasn't been done since. But I just think Tord just is on another level. He not only does he do so well and win so many like ICs and major tournaments, but he also just like innovates the card game. Like every time he does well, he sets the standard for how a deck performs. Did it with Lugia, did it with Charizard. I'm sure he's gonna do it again with Charizard Dragapult, which is I hear what he's playing today.
Y yo juego hace mucho tiempo, así que soy de la vieja escuela, así que yo voto por Jason Klesinski.
This has been a question for a long time, and I've had pretty strong opinions on it in the past that have changed drastically over the last few years. So I used to be a pretty big Tord opponent, but I think it has to be Tord at this point, just with all the accomplishments and how consistent and everything's been the last few years. So,
Who, in your opinion, is the greatest Pokemon TCG player of all time, and why?
I mean, there's so many options. Jason Klesinski. I mean, Pablo Mesa's pretty good, but I'm a little biased. My GOAT might be Andrew Mahone. That might be my GOAT, man.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll see you soon, bro.
Hey, have fun, bro. Yep. All right, Alex Holtz. Who is the greatest Pokemon TCG player of all time?
Jason Klesinski, obviously. I don't think no one will ever do what he did, and I don't care how many ICs Tord won. So that's where I'm at.
Perfect answer. That's what I'm talking about right there. 3 worlds. People forget.
People do forget.
3 worlds. JW Creewall. Who do you think is the greatest Pokemon TCG player of all time, and why?
That's got to be Jason Klesinski. I know that championships aren't everything, but if you look at what he accomplished over, I don't know, his 15 years of playing or 20 years of playing, and then winning a championship, a world championship, like decades apart, having 3, I think in my mind he's the GOAT.
Jesse Parker.
Oh, hello.
Who is the greatest Pokemon TCG player, and why?
I gotta say Tord Reklev. Although Jason has won 3 worlds, I think the stranglehold that Tord has had on the current modern competitive era is, I think, greater than Jason's was. He's just like, and I think there's more to come. So I think he's gonna prove that he's the greatest, like, in the years to come. So I think there's just more tournaments. I think he'll eventually win worlds. So yeah, I think it's gotta be Tord.
Very cool. Grant Manley, who is the greatest Pokemon TCG player of all time?
It's definitely me.
You have to consider a lot of things. You got to consider results, but also like the influence you have like on the game. And I think, with the Tord Jason argument, Tord has just innovated more. It's not to say Jason definitely could be doing well with like in the tournaments we have now, but I feel like Tord has just made so many broken decks that people haven't seen before. And I don't know, I got to give it to Tord.
Appreciate it. Thanks, John.
Of course, yeah.
Reagan, who do you think is the greatest Pokemon TCG player, and why?
I believe that Tord is the greatest TCG player because, he's won all 4 ICs. He's gotten second at Worlds. I didn't really play during the Jason era. I started in 16. So, from my perspective, I think it's Tord.
All right. Appreciate it, Reagan. Thanks. Lucas, rapid fire. All right, we're back. Regional champ Lucas here. Lucas, who do you think is the greatest Pokemon TCG player, and why?
It's got to be Tord, winning all 4 ICs. I'm pretty sure he's won 5, gone second at some. He has 2 Pikachu trophies a second, and he got top 4, I think. Multiple regional wins. I grew up in his era. I played against him a few times. He's just a really talented player, so I got to say Tord.
Appreciate it, Lucas.
No problem.
I'm here with Rahul Reddy. Rahul, who do you think is the greatest Pokemon TCG player?
It's got to be Tord Reklev. He's won 5 ICs. It's nearly impossible to match that kind of consistency and record.
Appreciate it, Rahul. Thanks. I'm here with Grant Chen. Grant, who do you think is the greatest Pokemon TCG player to ever play the game?
I think the GOAT is Ryan Antonucci.
Ethan Heggie.
What's going on? I'm good, man. We're out of Columbus this time, man. We made it out. We
did. I know. Incredible. I have a question for you. Who, in your opinion, is the greatest Pokemon TCG player of all time?
Don't put me on the spot like that too, man. Now, this is where we get a little philosophical here, you know, because we got somebody by greatest achievements, and then we got somebody by the greatest player in terms of skill, and then we got players based off of like how consistent they are in terms of performance, right? So I'm a numbers guy, right? I'm a numbers guy at the desk. I'm a numbers guy at heart. So I'm gonna tell you that Tord is the best player of all time because I mean, you look at his conversion rate, you look at how good he is in cut, and you look at not only how many times he makes the cut, but my man gets the job done. He gets in there, he gets the wins, he finishes off. That's what you need in a player, man. It's a boring answer, bro. I'm gonna tell you Tord's the greatest, bro. He's the greatest of all time.
Chip Ritchie, who is the greatest Pokemon TCG player of all time and why?
Man, it's so tough. I think it's got to be Tord, though. I know Jason's got the Worlds wins, but Tord has the consistency. All these ICs are massive that he's won. Tord's had great finishes at Worlds. He obviously hasn't won, but it's coming. It's coming. I've got the script.
All right. Who do you think is the greatest Pokemon TCG player of all time?
It's Tord. It's Tord. I mean, Jason's obviously very good, but until he comes back, it's Tord.
All right, thank you.
No problem.
Yep.
I'm currently a little bit up on the air on it. I initially used to say Jason, 3-time world champion. Most recently, I've said Tord. But the question that I think needs to be answered and that I haven't quite figured out is, does the greatest player of all time need to have won the world championships? And I'm actually not sure. And I think it's the question that needs to be answered. And then once you answer that, I think it's pretty obvious. If it's no, it's Tord. If it's yes, then it is still Jason.
And where do you put yourself on this list?
I don't really think about it too much. I'm not close to Jason or Tord, so it doesn't really matter until, you know, I'd have to have like one win Worlds this year or next year, and then maybe there's like a consideration to it, but like I'm not really thinking about it too much. When I win Worlds once, maybe I'll put some more thought into it.
All right, I appreciate your time as well. Thank you.
Of course.